Greetings. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and welcome back to another Walk Magick episode. We live in a world where the means to survive requires financial gains, and so today I want to talk about how a magician performing the great work might incorporate a career path into their true will. Let's begin. So I have points that are written down on script. I am also going to do a little bit of storytelling and a little bit of freestyling. Just bear that in mind. But to start, I think this is an important topic, as my observation is that many Thelemites, including myself, struggle at one point or another with finding a place in the mundane world while balancing their monetary means with their dedication to the great work. And this not only comes with doing your magical rituals, doing, let's say, grade work or degree work or, studying in general, right? Whether it's a specific order or solitary, it's still like a lot of time to study and practice. Well, you have to balance that with feeding yourself, clothing yourself, etc. But I just want to also, this is not on script, I want to also mention, just as an afterthought, you also have to balance with taking care of your regular life things on a daily basis, making sure everything's clean, making sure your house is in order, making sure that in order to eat, you make time to, say go grocery shopping or buy other supplies for your household. And then it comes with like paying rent and all of those other things, right? But in a world where providing for one's own necessities requires financial means, we are currently bound to acquire funds if we would live to perform the great work. Our current society is based on profits, and in my opinion is no way ideal, but it is what we have to deal with. I'm going to go into an exposition about the state of society regarding monetary means in a bit. But for now, I want to make a couple of notes and go over my own journey navigating the balance between paying bills and making time to do magic. I have two quotes from Liber Alva Legis, right? So I'm just going to read these, and these are very important to the topics that are at hand, and I'll explain why. Quote, "Let it be that state of manyhood bound in loathing, so with thy all, thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that, and no other shall say nay. For pure will unassuaged of purpose, delivered from the lust to result, is every way perfect." End quote. And the other one, quote, "Fear not at all. Fear neither men nor fates, nor gods, nor anything. Money fear not, nor laughter of the folk folly, nor any other power in heaven, upon the earth, or under the earth. Nu is your refuge, as Hadit your light, and I am the strength, force, vigor of your arms." End quote. Essentially, as Thelemites, we are bound to embrace the law and perform the great work by doing our will. For those especially dedicated, the want for material gain is meaningless to doing the work itself. In my experience, if you have a firm, dedicated path and are living bhakti to Nuit, by being Hadid, the mother will always provide what you need. It may not always be what you want, but what you need, certainly. And along the journey, to the point at which one is secure in the surety of their work, to the point that you no longer need faith because you have scientific evidence that, your needs will be met if you're truly on your path. The quote about not living in fear is an invaluable asset. Whether considering changing careers as you learn more about yourself, or living through times with an unstable economy, worrying is natural, but it stems from fear, and this must eventually be uprooted. The goal is essentially to live in line with the flow of nature and not to resist what is happening. Sure, as magicians, you make changes to the universe as they are necessary for you to do so, but it is of the utmost importance that you understand your actions and truly know why you are making a decision and how that will influence the world. Also keeping in mind that if you're walking this type of bhakti path, for example, you should not be living in fear over what's going to happen today, tomorrow, the next day. You try to live aligned with nature. So if my needs are ever not met and I ever perished from want of nourishment, for example, well, yes, I could try to make all the changes that I could try to make as a magician, but on the other side, I'm not afraid of death per se, right? I'm doing my work, like a flower, I'm going to come to fruition, and one day my physical body is going to wither away and perish, whether I want that or not. The I that wants anything is almost irrelevant. You need to just perform your function and accept what is. You change what you need to change based on self knowledge and based on knowledge of the universe, based on understanding of your holy guardian angel as an intermediary to the gods, and you accept everything else. You incorporate that experience into you and you let it shape you in what ways it needs to. With that said, I think here it may be helpful to switch gears and simply talk in earnest about my career path. I do this so you could see how I analyzed my own trajectory up to this point and began to identify what was and what was not working. And I'll add, I'm by no means wealthy, but together with my fiance, I'd say we live quite comfortably, enough to do the great work that we need to do, and I'm happy. My needs are met from food, shelter, clothing, social support networks, emotional states, mental states. We're both in great condition, right? So I think from here, I'm just going to go off script for a bit and I'll talk about my career path because work had been a big struggle for me, right? I've talked about this on the channel before. Like, I came from a very humble beginning. Some of my family is very wealthy, some of my family is very dysfunctional. And so I grew up in this weird state of either having a lot, or otherwise just being miserable, never wanting necessarily, but there was not a lot of love in my immediate household, but my extended family was relatively well put together. Um, One thing though, it between being trans and between dysfunctional immediate family, I ended up with a lot of anger, depression, anxiety, self-loathing that I, even in the society of northern Brooklyn in growing up in the 90s, it was not accepting to be trans, so I had like this internalized hate. Going to Catholic school as a child also did not help that process, which I've talked about in my video about Jesus and how you could technically work with any deity as a Thelemite, right? So a lot of this stuff got internalized and ended up coming out in like drug addiction and rebellionism and yeah, just making a big mess instead of developing during my teenage years. And so by the time I started to have mystical experiences through rave scenes and experimenting with certain psychedelics, I realized I was about 20 years old. I needed to make serious changes to my life. And some of those I was willing to make, some of those I was not. My immediate first step, which I realized at the time, was okay, I need to like stop the substance abuse cycles and see where that takes me because that'll at least give me more stability than I had currently had, and then I could figure out what my next steps were from there. Um, at that point, the only jobs that I had ever had, 20 years old, I had done some cashier work, I had sold drugs, and I was like a petty criminal that unfortunately got me in a lot of trouble, which was a saving grace because it gave me a lot of time incarcerated to reflect and to educate myself. So became very autodidactic in that sense, and it allowed me to find my spiritual magical path and then begin to navigate almost from rock bottom. And it just in my particular case, navigating from rock bottom was like great. Yes, I could always dig a hole deeper, but I mean, I had nothing else to lose at that point. So, like when you're starting magic, you're always worried about what I have and what's going to change. And, you know, some practices do temporarily make you unstable, too overgenic, where you make sudden decisions that are mistakes and you have to learn from and clean a lot of stuff up. I didn't have those problems because everything was a mess and I was already in cleanup mode. So it was pretty much fine. So I had like a stable foundation to rebuild my life. It was my own personal sandbox at that point. There was nothing that had to necessarily come down at that point. Everything was already torn down and I just had to start building up. You know, I'd start to build some of the wrong things. Like I wasn't yet ready to come out as trans that early on. And that was a fundamental part of my nature. And what I'm saying here, right, and this might be good for the listener, is you have to incorporate your nature into your work path, right? So even incarcerated, they make you do jobs, but none of that was really relevant to my path. The only thing I will say is that sometimes you do have to take jobs that you don't necessarily want to take just to make ends meet. And I'll talk about those momentarily. Okay, so I got out of there and I got to a point, at the time I was in full sobriety. I'm not in 12-step full sobriety now. I have a really good foundation where I don't need illicit substances, but I'm also like not afraid of them, if that makes sense. Um, kind of cured addiction in myself through magical practices to the point I'm not using anything, which is great. Could have a one, two, three drinks and not really care if I drink ever again. I do smoke tobacco, but yeah, the lesser of all the vices that I used to have, right? Um, so coming out, I got to a point at the time in sobriety where I needed to start focusing on, okay, what is my career path? And I had been doing a lot of writing at the time, and I guess I've always been a very creative person. Looking back early on in my life, as a teenager, I was doing graffiti and I was doing a lot of art and creative stuff. But then, starting to get into magic, I was reading a lot and I started writing a lot, whether it was notes about what I had read, or interpretations of various authors, or just my magical diaries, or specific spiritual awakening moments. I enjoyed the writing process. So I figured let me go back to college, or actually go to college for the first time and try to take some type of writing because I didn't have any other direction of what are my skills and what can I do with myself. So I did start taking college courses. Of course, they make you take mandatory courses. You have to take your math, your science, your this, your that. But then you get your electives and then you get your main courses based on whatever your major is. So I was doing my writing course, and from like a ninth grade high school dropout to now, 7 years, 8 years, almost 10 years later. I was about 23, 20, 24 when I went back to college, or went to college, and I had dropped out of school pretty much at 14 years old. So there was a 10-year gap where I was, even in grammar school, I was not like a straight A student. I would get like one C here or there, mostly A's, and then one B and like one C, depending on the year and who the teacher was and what we were learning in those specific classes, right? Usually it was like history or something as a kid I was not so much interested in and I paid less attention to, and I ended up getting like a C. So I could kind of trace a thread back to that like even today doing these videos, for me it's more practical and less historical, right? Like I'm always constantly looking at my path and where I'm going as a magician, as opposed to, well, let's look at the whole entire history of this thing, right? More service oriented and action and doing the now rather than focus on the past, right? Or the scholarly aspects. But so I was taking these writing courses and I got a job in journalism. I was writing for a local paper in Brooklyn and I enjoyed it. I even self-published a couple of books. They're not available currently, I don't believe. I don't make money off of them, or I never really made money off of them. So I realized, and even in journalism, it was very difficult to make any type of stable income. And also having an editor review what you put a lot of time and dedication into. Say I interviewed a local politician in Brooklyn and wrote an article about that. Well, I hand in this article that I have some type of attachment to because I had this experience with this person that I was asking questions and crafted a narrative and picked out what they said and quoted them and wrote this whole thing. And for me, that was like an art form. To have the editor come in and just, I don't like this, I'm going to change this, and this is good, but I'm going to scratch out that word and put this word because to me it sounds better, and I'm the editor, I'm the one in charge. That drove me crazy. So it was not like a feasible way to necessarily make money unless I really dedicated long term and got into better and better outlets. Also, journalism is now digital, and I'm not so much a digital person. I much prefer, you know, pen and paper over computers any day, honestly. But I'd rather read a book than a PDF also. So it's like journalism was not for me. Having an editor is not for me. So I was like, writing is not for me. I did really well in college and I ended up getting into Harvard temporarily. I did a year of courses there. But then I wasn't happy with writing at that point. I had a couple of jobs in writing and I did not like it. And now I was spending a lot of money in student loans going for a writing degree, and I was just like, this is not gonna work for me. And I had to make a decision of like, well, do I stay in school and just get this degree, or do I try something else? And I made the decision, I'm gonna try something else. So I finished that one semester, the final semester, and then I dropped out of school, right? And so from there, I took a few retail jobs. I was pretty much anytime I could fix a lot of other areas of my life. I could build up. I could do my magic. I could advance in the great work. I could help people. I like doing this. I like doing that. But none of it seemed to be translating into a stable way to make money, right? So now at this point, it's like 2020. It's like COVID, like late COVID, late 2020. Um, and I was seriously, seriously struggling with like, what is my career path? Because now it's been like 6 years performing the great work, and I've made some progress in this part of my life, making a stable income. But mostly it was just like taking odd jobs here and there and trying to pay what bills and get my what I need to survive rather than incorporating some type of job into my true will. And I don't like to use magic necessarily for mundane things unless that's the message I'm getting from my holy guardian angel. That's the only way that I find it acceptable. You deal with the mundane plane on the mundane plane by mundane means. You deal with the spiritual via magical means. Until it gets to the point that the message is, okay, I have no other option and I need to progress in this area of my life. What is the one thing I haven't tried? Have I exhausted all other possibilities? Yes. So I had recently, let me preface this, because I did do magic for this part of my life, but I'll come right back to that. I was doing like group therapy around being trans and some other stuff going on in my life, and I was just processing, like I had a couple of deaths. My sister had passed away, and two of my best friends passed away in succession. Um, and I had just quit a retail job, so I had a little bit of free time on my hands, and I wanted to kind of process three people, two friends from high school that I was extremely close with, and then my younger sister passing away. I wanted to process that in a healthy manner. So I started attending groups and doing some talk therapy and some one-on-one therapy as well, and just a lot of processing. Um, Ultimately, I had come out of a group and I might have been daydreaming in the group. Maybe I heard or saw something, don't remember. But I was walking and I was like, I miss doing graffiti. It's been like 10 years. Every so often, I'll just draw with a pencil and paper, like a quick sketch of some letters or something. But like, I don't, it's just a chance thought, right? And there's like that quote from Libre Libre. If a chance thought can produce much, what not can fixed thought do? And at this point, I have fixed thought. Been dedicated to the work at that point a solid 8 years, right? Like from 2012, my first mystical, spiritual, magical experience to 2020, solid 8 years. So I had this one thought coming out of a group, right? Where I want to do art again. I wonder what it'd look like if I did like graffiti, but in some type of magical sense. What words are there that I could probably think of? Should I do like a Hebrew thing? And then I thought, like, I love the Kabbalah. What about if like I did like something mercurial? Oh, what about like Hode? If I took the word Hode and did it in graffiti style, what colors would I use? It's like, oh yeah, like yellow for air, orange, maybe purple because it kind of bounces good against orange. That could be kind of cool. And I was like, huh, I have money. I could go to an art store, go buy a canvas and some markers and mess around, even if it's just for fun. And then I ended up buying a set of canvases, a bunch of markers, and I decided I was going to do the 10 Sephiroth. Um, and so I had done that, and I wasn't really expecting much from it, but my fiance said, "Hey, they're pretty good. You should put them up on my website. I could advertise them as an art piece." And a friend from California actually ended up buying them, which I was a while later. Like I had sat on them, and I didn't really think anything was going to come of it, but they were available, and I liked them, and I was happy doing them. And that's a key that I look back on. I did it, and it wasn't for the money. It was because I was happy doing it, and that was it. So somebody actually bought them like a year later, something like that. They'd sat in my apartment for a while. never thought anything would come of them. Somebody bought them, and that made me feel really good. At the same time, my fiance got an offer. Somebody wanted him to make them a stele as a gift for somebody, and commission. And he see my art, and he was like, "Why don't you try to make it?" And I started looking at a stele on my wall. I was like, "Oh, how would I make one of these?" I'd bought them from people before, but how would I actually make it? I was like, "Oh, I could cut wood. I could probably sand wood to shape. I could plaster it. I could I'm looking at the things on it, like, oh, I could imitate that exact style." And from the first one to now I've done 22 of them. You get better with practice and experience. But even the first one I produced, I'm very happy with. The person who received it was very happy with it. And so between selling those paintings and my fiance encouraging me by giving me a commission that he didn't have the time to do, but he did feel I could make, was like, whoa, I could actually maybe make money doing something artistic. So that one chance thought coming out of whatever I was doing and daydreaming and just happened to flow through my mind. I wonder what it'd be like if I did some art, right? And I just happened to latch onto it. I was like, "Ooh, that's it. That's an interesting thought. There's something there." And I could look back to childhood. Like I'd go to museums with my grandmother when I was very young. I remember seeing like one of the big Jackson Pollock paintings, and how it's just chaos and paint and splattered everywhere, and some colors, but it's just like a white backdrop with blacks and a little bit of accents of red or blue or something. I was like, huh, if that's art, I could do that. I remember going home and just scribbling all over papers and like, yeah, this is technically art. And I always loved art, even probably 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. My great aunt, had a friend, and we'd go to visit my great aunt, my other great aunt, her sister, and I'd see the friend that lived next door, and he was a professional artist, like a full-time artist. I think he might have even been an art teacher. And he knew that I kind of liked art, so he'd show me what he had drawn, and he would give me some charcoal or some pastels and let me mess around on some big scrap paper, and gave me some pointers, and hey, you could try doing this, or if you don't have an idea, try doing this and it can help spark an idea. So I had always had this interest in art, and then getting into high school doing graffiti. So one thing led to another. And I think looking at your life and seeing what do you enjoy and how have you built up skills in that, and what skills are you lacking, is one of the most fundamental things to having a career path, right? So I had sold those canvases. I took the money, I immediately bought more canvases, and I bought a paint set. And I was like, well, what can I do now? Let me try doing something that's not letters. And, I've done, I don't know, 50 paintings at this point of various varieties and private commissions and stuff that's on sale on my fiance's website, and 22 different steles. Um, and so I had started to build up this art repertoire, but I wasn't necessarily making money in the beginning of it. It was just like I had sold those one set of canvases, it was 10 paintings, and then I sold one stele. I made a couple more steles. I might have sold one or two of those. It wasn't anything like kind of full time. And I was like, okay, if art's my career, I don't know, maybe it's possible. But at that point, I needed like a more steady income. And I had said, okay, I'm getting the message at this point. It's been years. I need to find something more stable. And so I did some type of Jupiter ritual, which I'm not going to go into the details of. You could figure out how to do your own Jupiter rituals, right? It's not necessarily the point of this. It's just I had come to that point. But I always leave these type of things when I don't like doing magic on the for mundane means. But if it has to be done, it needs to be in line with my true will. That's the stipulation that I always impose upon myself, that okay, I need a career path that is in line with my true, or aligned with my true will. So I did that specific intention in a Jupiterian ritual to help me advance my career. And I'd done it in the morning, went about my business. It was now like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It was my routine. I got home from what I was doing in Manhattan. I was walking around a local park, probably smoking a cigarette, and my next door neighbor, who I had seen 100 times and never once talked to, saw me wearing all black, and she looked at me and she said, "Hey, have we ever worked together? Are you in film or theater?" I was like, "No, I've never worked in film or theater. Definitely never with you. But it's funny because I'm actually interested in getting into a new work field. And she says, huh, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm an artist and I'm trying to build a career as a professional artist. And I would love any opportunity. She's like, that's amazing. I'm an art director in independent film and theater. And it was just like, whoa, this happened so quick that like years of like trying to figure out exactly what it was just clicked in that moment, right? Where it was like, huh, okay, very cool. She invited me to my first gig. It actually took like a year to lock in, but she showed me the ropes. She ended up moving out of state before the film actually took off. So she had done some minimal pre um, pre-shoot work, pre-production work, but yeah, she had left before she could actually be involved in it. But the director and the producer and the screenwriter had all said, well, she was a close enough friend. She was going to have me on as her assistant. Let's keep her on as an assistant. Let's get another art director. So they hired an art director and they had told her, well, you could, yes, we like your resume, we like your work, we feel like we could work well with you, your vibe, but we have a stipulation that you could have another assistant, but you also have to take this person you don't know as an assistant. And she's like, this can go well or this can go very bad. But she said, okay, fine, whatever. And I'll be working with her again this coming weekend. So we've done several jobs together. We've hung out. We've had a drink or two here or there. And she's a friend at this point. And yeah, that first job showed me like, oh, I could build stuff. I also neglected to mention as a teenager, my cousin owned a construction company. So if I didn't work for him during the summers, or especially after I dropped out of school, I was working construction. I also had a guy in Middle Village, Queens, that would hire me and a couple of my friends to do demolition work on various construction sites. So I learned a lot, and also my uncle was he was in the Navy, so he was very hands-on with stuff. He taught me a little bit of electricity work. He taught me a little bit of carpentry. Taught me how to use tools. He taught me a lot of basics in construction, which growing up as a boy, like that's what it was. You try to teach hands-on craft work, right? Just men kind of vibe over that stuff. But I have these skills. Also, when I was in prison, you have to either have a job or go to school or training or something. So I took plumbing as a training, so I am technically an apprentice plumber, which I don't like doing. However, it taught me how to read schematics, create blueprints, how to solder. I tried also out years prior. I think I was 18 at the time. I tried a welding course, so I do know how to weld. I also don't like doing that just because of the risk of it. But I have all of these construction trades, but I also have all of these artistic trades. Well, my first time on a film set, I realized, ooh, I'm going to be lifting, I'm going to be building, I'm going to be doing some minor carpentry, and you have to sometimes problem solve. Sometimes you have an idea of how to do something that's going to work, doesn't work, and you need to build something on the spot. Sometimes you need to paint rooms and then paint them back. Sometimes you have to wallpaper, yeah, which I never knew how to do until I had to do it. And so I started to learn like, oh, so I could be very artistic, I could be creative, and I can use skills working with my hands in borderline construction type things using whether it's power tools or physical tools, right? And I like doing all those things. I was insecure doing them before, but kind of after transitioning, it's hilarious. I love doing those type of things, but I would not do it in a construction field. It needs to be more of a creative capacity. And so for the time being, this has worked for me. I've done many gigs. I've done independent film and theater for the past 3 to 4 years, something like that. Um, and it's been good. And then in between that, I do my paintings, right? So that's how my career path kind of laid itself out. Um, I have pointers, right? If you're one, taking inventory of what skills you have and what skills you lack are very important. Especially once you figure out, I want to do this specific thing, finding out what skills you lack and then training yourself in them. Getting hands-on practice, even if it's just buying something yourself and figuring out how to do it, that's better than just reading a book sometimes. Sometimes you're not gonna, if you're in like a scientific field, you're gonna need a lab, and so it might be dangerous. You might need exhaust fans or chemicals or specific solutions that are very expensive. Obviously, you would need a lab or find a friend that is in that field and talk to them and ask them for pointers and how you could get hands-on with some stuff like that. But try to get some type of hands-on experience in something, even if it's not paid, right? That's one thing. Two, taking a full inventory of your work history, your education history, very important. See what you liked and what you didn't like. So if a job has something that is like a hard no, I hate doing this, well, you know, like that specific job, or maybe it's a whole field that needs that thing, is not for you. I don't like doing digital art, so there are animation companies for like I've been thinking of getting into animation a little recently, but I would do something more old school that requires something like cell animation where you actually draw on like a clear type of cellulose paper and you do it by hand, and then you take an actual photo of that thing, and then you compile all of these frames together to create almost like a flip book, right, of imagery, as opposed to using a digital program to paint or sculpt or make 3D renderings, right? So digital stuff at this point in time is like a hard no for me, but hands-on drawing would be something that I'm really interested in. So like knowing what is a hard yes and what is a hard no for you is very helpful. And then just ultimately knowing yourself, your nature, and trying to navigate that. Keep in mind, while I was on this whole path, I was lucky. At one point, I was living with my family. Um, I lived with my fiance, and at the beginning, he was able to cover the bills, and I contributed what I could when I could, right? So I had stability set in place. That's something that you have to also consider. There were times where I needed money and I had to take those retail jobs to make ends meet. And it's like sometimes you just need to sell yourself because you have to make money to survive. If you have this wider true will to do, well, like my main thing is magic. If I had to throw everything except for one major thing in my life out the window, magic is gonna stay. And that's my ultimate. Doing the great work, trying to help guide humanity forward through Thelema, through the Book of the Law, trying to live the Book of the Law myself on a daily basis, trying to continue to do what practice is and everything I need to do. That's my number one, right? And I had at least a short foundation where, yes, I had the time to focus on that strictly in the beginning. I made a lot of progress as much as I could, and then from there I learned enough about myself that I could start building up other areas of my life, transitioning, relationship, career, social networks. All of those came to me secondary to the great work. But right, even now working, I still need to, for myself, that doing these videos is currently part of my true will. There may come a point where it's not, and I would stop and focus on something else. But for now, spreading information through this means, through this medium, is something that I need to do. So yeah, I have a lot going on right now. But as soon as my apartment's clean, my shopping's done, my jobs are done, I finally have a free hour and a half block that I could dedicate to recording this, and then maybe editing later tonight or tomorrow to upload. Great. Do not, like, this is one of the main things. Do not put things off. Organize as best as possible, and then do those things. Don't let stuff pile up, because when things pile up, nothing's going to get done, and then you have to spend time that could have been way more economically useful towards many different things in your life. Suddenly you have to do a bunch of stuff that you neglected. So never neglect what needs to be done. Organize time frames. I used my calendar app, for instance, and do those things. Yes, you need to take time to rest. You need to take time for a little bit of enjoyment. Sometimes I need to schedule, or just I finish what I needed to do today and I have a couple hours, I'm going to sit down and veg out. Yeah, I could be doing other stuff, but I want to just maybe play a video game, or I want to watch a movie or something, just to kind of give myself a break and recharge, because you could burn out also. But putting things off when you have to do things, that's like really, really important. Ah, but I neglected a point that I was making before I started ranting. And this is the last portion of storytelling, and then I'll move on to some practical points that I have, and some ideas that I think really could help society in general. But the last portion of storytelling is balancing your magical practices while maintaining some type of work career, right? Yes, sometimes you need to take a job that you don't want. Sometimes you're experimenting and trying new fields. For example, when I was in college, I ended up being able to get an internship. I was at Harvard at the time, and there was an internship with if you're in college, you can get into an internship at City Hall. So I did an internship in De Blasio's office, in the office of the mayor, where I was a correspondent, and I got to do some security detail. I got to do some private events with the mayor. Um, I did a lot of office work. At the same time, I was doing activism for trans rights throughout Manhattan and throughout Brooklyn. So I was involved in a lot of things, and I was also, for many years, I worked the elections, which right now I'm not doing. This was the first year in many, many years that I stopped working the elections. I had started as a poll worker, and then I became a coordinator of the poll site, and I enjoyed it for what it was worth. But I just am diverting into more creative fields than I want to be involved in politics, especially in the current climate. It's almost like my protest is to do what I need to do elsewhere and not be directly involved in canvassing for politicians, um, making phone calls, knocking on doors, getting signatures, going to political rallies. I used to do public speaking for a while. I've collected money at the door for donations for politicians at private events. So I've done a lot of things along those lines. For example, when I was at City Hall, I was taking courses in school and I was working as an intern. I still made sure I was doing the Bornless ritual at the time. So I was very immersed in my holy guardian angel. Well, I need to take a break. I need to either step outside and I'll tell them I'm going on a smoke break, or if I had to, I'd go to the bathroom and at that specific time, I'd go do the Bornless one. And I was also doing Libra Resh at that time period every single day for months straight. As soon as the sun rose, I was up. I made sure to do my Libra Reshes. I made sure to do my Bornless ritual. I made sure to do my practices regardless of work. For me, my magical path had to come first, and my work had to be incorporated into, well, I need these practices at this time. How can I maintain my education, studying, writing my essays and theses, and going to work? And so you have to make time. You have to budget your time economically if you're going to be a magician, performing the great work, and also maintaining a career path. And it's better when you have something that's more aligned with your true will, something more aligned with your nature work wise, but sometimes you're figuring that out. Well, regardless, there are things that you could do. Look at Freder Achad's Magical Diaries, which is in the Magical Diary of Aleister Crowley, right? Or the Magical Diary. It's like that purple book, that purple paperback by Weiser, where it has John St. John and the magical record of Freder Achad, the master of the temple. Freder Achad was working in an office and he was doing yoga practices where today I'm not going to lift my arm above my waist. And so he went through his day. This is a type of dharana where it's also a type of pratyahara where you're putting your mind on a specific part of your body. So there are things that you can do even when you're working that are either mystical or magical that you could do and nobody would know. Sometimes I didn't want to step outside, and so it'd be the beginning of my lunch break around 12:30, depending on what time the sun was going to be midday. And I would just tell my workers, hey, I'm just going to take a few minutes during my lunch break. Don't mind me. I'm going to do some breathing exercises. And I would just sit there and do some fourfold breaths or some more deep breathing or some other types of pranayama. I might even sit there and silently face the direction of the sun, which is the south in the afternoon, midday, and do my Libra Resh mentally, right? And then after work every day, knowing that I still have to get home and do my education workload, I would walk from Manhattan to Brooklyn, which was from lower Manhattan to northern Brooklyn where I lived, was about an hour and a half walk, and I would do Libra Roost spirit breathing the entire way. And I pushed the time up. It started with like 4 steps in per breath, 4 steps, pause, breathe out for 4 steps walking, and then pause for another 4 steps. I worked my way up to like 20 steps per breathe in, pause for 20 steps, and then I did other variations where you breathe for less time in, you walk, you pause for more time, you breathe out for more time, you pause for more time. So I did many variations on that. So there are ways that you can incorporate your magical practice while maintaining a job. And the very last thing, it's like the further you get into the practical side of magic, especially grade work, the practices aren't necessarily all daily regimen type stuff. Yes, you could still do those at any given point in your magical career. Some of them are beneficial throughout your entire magical career. But at a certain point, especially after adepthood, right? Especially after achieving knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, one of the main jobs that you have is doing your true will. Yes, there is still magical practices in the grade work of Adeptus Major and Adeptus Exemptus and the Babe of the Abyss. Especially once you cross that abyss threshold and somebody becomes a master, it becomes more about tending your garden, doing your true will, helping people, and delivering the logos from Chakma through you, whatever that logos is, right? So it becomes less strictly about like the practical stuff. Like, yes, you're still gonna have magical practices. Where I'm at right now, I'm doing the Enochian system, but I'm taking my very sweet time with them. I also do trainings with people in private, right? So I have classes. I do my lectures here, and then every so often I have my banishings, and every month I have my Lamp of Invisible Light ritual. And just throughout the day, there are some things that I say will before every single meal, right? So that's some type of still connection on like an easy practical thing that you can do at any given time. You don't have to do it loud. You could be at work and nobody would know that you're knocking, and you could do it so quietly, right? And then every so often there's something like even the Adeptus Exemptus has to study, like, I think believe it's Liber Yod, all of the philosophies of like all of the philosophers, and really analyze these things. And it's like overloading your brain to the point that you reconcile the fact that we can't know anything, and you're able to kind of propel through the abyss, right? By driving the mind, the conscious. It's almost like doing a mantra where you give your mind something so repetitious to focus on, and you keep focusing on it, and you keep doing it, and your mind becomes so enmeshed in that thing that eventually your unconscious is allowed to explode forth. It's something similar to that. Slightly different, but somewhat similar. You're kind of driving yourself purposely crazy to make the conscious mind dumb so that the unconscious can flower forth. So you could transcend the conscious mind and step into this state of union, right? So that's like my storytelling. From here, I have just some practical things that I want to share. Things that I believe if we came together as a species would help people on this front of figuring out career stuff. And let me just dive into it, right? In a Thelemic world, I hold that the means for survival would be provided, and thus every individual would be able to focus solely upon doing their true will. That would be their main work. We are unfortunately a far way off from that goal. Now, before anyone cries that capitalism is the way of Thelema, I'd like to point you to the Blue Equinox and also go over a world history regarding such matters. I think this is vital because in order to see where we are going, it does help to look back at where we came from in order to see that trajectory taking action, right? Where did we come from and where are we going? You're going to see that trajectory. In the Blue Equinox, Crowley has several documents for which he hoped the OTO would use as their outline and hold as their gold standard to strive towards. Unfortunately, these standards have either not yet been met or have been abandoned altogether, and even if they were, the benefits thereof would only be accessible to members of said order, who remained in good standing in dues current. Regardless, I think many of the ideas presented appeal to a wider audience, and the application thereof would be a benefit to everyone worldwide were they implemented. So, I'll outline what I hold to be an ideal society, at least in certain extents, and what has to be implemented in order to make that happen. right? I think the idea of like a Star Trek future where money no longer existed and where the sole purpose of humanity is for each person to better themselves would probably be the best thing to strive towards. Therefore, lust of results as a consequence of taking on work would cease. The only gain would be the satisfaction of each individual living their life as their most authentic self, discovering what their highest functions as a human being are, and success in the true will the only reward. Millennia ago, we were hunter-gathering nomads who followed food and camped near bodies of water. Then we learned how to domesticate livestock and farm, and build villages around where such things could be done. Then came trade. Can't grow everything in one specific part of the world, but as we developed, you trade with other societies, and a governing body to oversee commerce. And finally, taxes to establish a subservience to the governing body in order to hold the entire project together. Right? So we created a thing called currency, which I give you this and it represents this many things of that type of thing. And we need some type of agency that oversees that these transactions are agreeable, we make these trades, and that this form of currency is sufficient. Well, we got better at these trades. We began studying science in ancient Greece and Rome and Egypt and other parts of Africa and Asia and the Americas. We began to engineer new techniques, build skills in trade guilds, exchange information for currency and supplies. And then came empires trying to hold sway over all of it. Wars fought to determine which nation empires would guide the course of humanity, and then ideological wars about how to best govern. Communism, socialism, nationalism, fascism, capitalism, etc. all broke out. And now, where are we? We have jobs and work in fields which many people aren't suited for, and which should function to provide the needs of people living in civilization, but instead serve to ingratiate the greed of CEOs who do not care if society progresses so long as their pockets are filled with coin and their power holds are secure to tickle their fragile and insecure egos. So, I hold that we are at the tipping point. Progress is certainly being made, but the defects of our species are glaring. And in this episode is a call to arms to combat the trajectory on an individual basis. If you do your true will and you dedicate yourself to this, you lead by example, you spread the message, there will be others that will see, wow, that is a way better way to do things, and then it starts to grow. But we need everybody to be doing this. We need more than a majority. We need most. Yes, I realize we live in a world where, based on where we came from, in order to feed ourselves, you need money, and that requires a job. Sometimes that job does not align with your nature at all. Sometimes you have to suck it up, sometimes you have to take a job just to make ends meet, but you could still be working on yourself and working towards getting into a new field and acquiring skills that get you better at that field while you're taking that job that is not for you. But even this, we can change. I'll get into the how in a moment, but I'll first list the very things which can be implemented even by our current world governments if we as a species were so inclined as to demand changes through our elected representatives. The things we can work towards as a species include the implementation of introspection as young as first grade. As soon as a child learns to write, they should be taught how to endeavor to learn about themselves on an emotional and mental level, taught to discover their strengths, weaknesses, preferences, and personality. This should be done with their own privacies ensured so that they do not fear peer pressure or feelings of insecurity or bullying or making fun of because you are a certain type of way. No, just be honest with yourself. Rather, vulnerability with a teacher in a confidential one-on-one basis should be secured to help them learn about themselves through reflections, exercises, and self-inventory. Specialized trainings for those who learn what their skill sets are in high school should be implemented and secured so that while they learn the other basics of knowledge, they can begin focusing on those fields which they are most naturally inclined to learn and do later on in life. For instance, speaking for myself, the only class that I ever took in high school was art, and I aced it with an A, even though I was not going to school. That was the only class. I'd show up for art once or twice, 3 times a week, and then that was it. And I loved it. So if we would have had this type of system, I could have benefited from it. I'm sure many people know I want to be a scientist because I love science. I want to be a psychologist because I love helping people and I find the intricacies of the human mind fascinating. I want to do agriculture. I want to do environmental protection, green type of work, whatever it is, right? You start to realize these things at certain points, but sometimes it doesn't align, or sometimes your family wants you to do something else that is not aligned with who you are. And you face that type of pressure from your peers or your family, your elders, whoever, right? I was always told you can't make money as an artist. And so I internalized that and I never took it serious. Well, eventually I became a Thelemite and I realized I don't care what anybody else thinks. I need to do what I need to do. Well, if we could start to implement that ideology of just do what you need to do and nobody has a say in that from early on in the human life cycle, I think that that could be of the utmost benefit. Needless to say, this should be done in the public sector, and privatization of education should be abolished, putting every individual on equal footing. Higher nutrition standards should be implemented to give people a better education about the nutrition they need as an individual, and so that they become thoroughly familiar with the problems of food waste in our current world. That would also come if we could get to a point like we don't have replicators like Star Trek that could just, make food for us. We still have to have people who would work in those fields. So it's like, yes, to what extent? Like, how do we provide food? Some people want more food. Some people want certain types of food, right? But just being conscious, only taking what you need. And if we could find a way also to grow off of the land instead of trying to make the land conform to our types of farming, I think it would be a lot healthier for the environment, and it would also lead to less food waste and less overconsumption. Also, if you're taught more radically about what nutrition you actually need and why people crave certain types of food, what chemicals are added to food to make them, like McDonald's, for instance, or things that are high in sodium especially, are more addictive because your taste buds just kind of crave more of it, and it doesn't necessarily fill you up, but it's high calorie and it's not good for you, and it makes you eat more and more and more. So if we were taught in school at a very young age about these things to watch out for and why it would be beneficial to watch out for them, you would have a better chance later on in life to avoid certain pitfalls of health. Right? And then if we could ever get to a point where only people who became farmers that's their true will to be a farmer, well then they would be doing that for the satisfaction of doing that. It wouldn't necessarily be about currency. We'll get to that momentarily. Free retirement homes. And this is from the Blue Equinox, where they had the idea that older OTO members could retire to free housing, right? So free retirement homes where elders are engaged and sought for their wisdom, and who are cared for by those of the community who are naturally inclined towards nursing and the like. Universal medical coverage to combat the transmission of disease and to treat illnesses free of charge. Yes, free healthcare. We can also streamline a lot of bureaucratic processes and not only make government assistance more easily available, but internal corporate processes more easily to be navigated. For example, in trade fields, such let's say construction, right? Artistic fields, nursing fields, paid internships should be made available to anyone who demonstrates interest in a specific field, so that they can get hands-on training while also proving that they can learn and perform the duties of a job field that they aspire towards while they're seeking their education. And that'll also tell them, wait, am I wasting my time in my college, or do I actually like this field? Because sometimes what I think I see on paper is good, but then when I get hands-on, it's not for me. So I think that more easily available internships would be a benefit. So if we implemented internships in almost every field, hire a person that oversees the department of interns, it would be so much more beneficial. People wouldn't spend 8 years going for a PhD to be a lawyer when they should have been something completely different. Maybe they needed to be a clown or a stage magician or something, an entertainer of some sort. But because of the pressure for financial gain, and maybe family wanted them to be a lawyer, maybe their parents were lawyers and wanted them to follow suit, and so that pressure becomes internalized, and they end up wasting years. And it sounds good on paper. I enjoy studying this, but then actually practicing it might not be for them. That happens all the time. So being able, while you're in academia, being able to go into some type of internship more easily, I think would be very beneficial. This, of course, comes with higher education problems in academia, which itself needs an overhaul. Perhaps I'll get into colleges at a later time in more depth, right? These are things that I think that we can implement now. Um, yeah, I would like to see a world without money where money doesn't matter. That's not where we are. Ultimately, what I could say, don't take don't look for jobs based on, oh, is it gonna pay me a lot of money? Do it because you love doing it. And I don't like the thing like, oh, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. That's bullshit. Sometimes it's still hard work, but you could really enjoy doing that hard work. It's still work, right? But try to be mindful with what type of work you're doing and why you're doing it, right? Like my painting, for instance, I am I have a very specific niche of like I paint religious symbolism, occult symbolism. So by looking at my paintings, I'm almost creating talismans for people to view. My energy, my art, my creativity is poured into these canvases, and I enjoy that. And so I feel like I'm making an impact doing that. I run like a Facebook art group, occult art, and I've, you know, a substantial amount of people, like 27,000 members, and it feels good to be able to post art there, whether it's my own or promote other artists, right? That's something that's aligned with what I'm already doing, and it doesn't take too much work to manage. It's relatively easy. You just have to create guidelines and then stick to those guidelines and then adapt when necessary, right? Sometimes you learn something new that like, oh, this needs to, like AI, for instance. I don't like AI art for the reason that it steals from other artists, and also a lot of what's produced on it is not yet even good, or people are just typing in something and then calling themselves an artist when they didn't actually necessarily, they created an idea, but they didn't execute that idea. A computer executed that idea for them. So it becomes that weird ground of like, well, are you an artist or is the computer the artist that you just prompted it to do something? It's like you can be a supervisor, but like let's say I'm working for like a I don't know, a clothing company. Well, I need to I want to put out a line of clothes, and my general guideline is I need jackets that are pink. Well, I have to have artists that are creating visual representations or like concept art of those pink jackets. They might create 20 pieces of concept art. Then I can see them and decide, oh, that one looks really good. Well, you're not the artist. Like, you had an idea. I think pink jackets are going to sell this year. So I'm going to hire artists to create images of that's what AI currently is. The other problem with AI is that it's going to end up destroying a lot of jobs as it gets better. A lot of people in the tech industry might end up getting replaced over the next 15 years. You know, if you could get to the point with AI that it could create, oh, you tell the parameters, oh, I need a website that does this, write the code for me. Well, you don't need IT people necessarily, right? If you have like a troubleshooter IT person, they're even implementing, like in the court system, what are the guidelines and how much time does this person deserve? Well, things like this become very dangerous. On another, no, you need people there because there's moral considerations when it comes to sentencing. Like, an AI doesn't necessarily, it could read or review an article about what it means to be incarcerated, but it doesn't have the understanding of I'm putting a person in jail and what does that actually mean? Because it doesn't have a body or human experience or emotion or a brain, right? And it doesn't experience psychological trauma the way humans experience psychological trauma from confinement. So there are multiple considerations when you're, say, putting a person in jail as a judge and sentencing, right? So, but if AI could get to the point, even if it could do all of that, well, then it replaces everybody's jobs. Then that gives people more free time. Well, how are we making money in a capitalistic world to feed ourselves at that point? Now, we're not there yet, but it's just something to consider as a possible future concern. Maybe 20, maybe 50 years down the line, maybe there's going to be some other type of new technology that comes and is even more sophisticated than anything AI could do, and it'll just run the world for us so we can focus on bettering ourselves. I don't know what that would be called or what it'd look like, but I mean, technology is crazy, right? It's like years ago you needed assembly lines of people. Now you have assembly lines of machines. Now you're gonna have AI come in and do a bunch of things that humans used to do. So where are we going as a species, and how are we monetizing things based on the amount of work available for the amount of people that need to eat, clothe themselves, pay rent, which is also out of fucking control. Many places in the world, especially in the United States, rent is out of control. Their homeowners are like a thing of the past, unless you suddenly come up on money. If you're just a lower or upper middle class person, aspiring to own a house is not necessarily American dream anymore. It's I just want to live. I want to be able to afford groceries and rent is really like the American dream right now, which is pretty sad. So that being said, it's like it's possible in 50 years from now we won't need to work jobs unless we want to work those jobs. But then our needs still need to be met. So what is the point of currency? It's just things to consider, right? We're making decisions as a species, and are we really looking 10, 15, 20 years, 50 years in the future? And where are we going with any of this? What is the end goal? Well, I've laid out some things that we could do now that would help people immediately while all of these other things are being implemented. And if any of it resonates with anybody, if it plants a seed in that one person's head that can go out there and make a difference, excellent. That's exactly what I made this video for. At the same time, if anything here just helps you in your life navigating, doing the great work, getting your magical practices done, and also taking care of your life stuff, and also, which includes mental health, emotional health, social stuff, friends, family, feeding, food, shelter, clothing, base necessities, and then wants, right? There's always time for wants. I mentioned I play video games to kill some time here and there. It's like you need to enjoy yourself also. It's not all just work. You need to have some sense of enjoyment. So find the things, even if it's reading fiction or something, find something that you like to occupy some spare time, some rest and engagement and rest, right? So I just hope that this helps somebody navigate how to incorporate their true will with work, incorporate a career into their true will path, doing the great work. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's like we want to just be a hermit in a cave on a mountain, but you still need to find food and shelter. So it's like, well, you could do that, but you know, yeah, just take care of yourselves. At this point, I'm ranting. Love is the law. Love under will. Hope this helped. Catch you on the next one.